Okay, so welcome everybody to another Nova Scribes. Lauren, do you want to take us through the meeting startup?
Absolutely. Are we going to share screen or are you going to move your head?
I'm going to share my screen.
Excellent. So, welcome to Facilitation Basics for Scribes. So why this session? Well, a lot of times if you're a visual practitioner or someone that's maybe in more of a traditionally silent role, you may not always get the chance to facilitate. However, your role as a visual capture person really depends on understanding what's happening in the room, so understanding good group process. And what can sometimes happen, and it's happened to me and it may have happened to you too, is that even if you weren't planning to facilitate, you might get tapped on the shoulder to facilitate maybe a small breakout group or something like that. So it's always a good idea that even if facilitator is not your main role, to have a basic sense of a facilitation flow and some facilitation modalities so that you're never caught off guard with that. And so some of you who are already facilitators, what I would do is think of this as a train the trainer, and you can absolutely walk away from this session with things that you could build into your facilitation trainings. And for those of you who are new to facilitation, this is going to give you a broad brush overview of some things to know and tune into. And then keep going after this. We can definitely recommend some really great trainings and things to continue your education further. So outcomes for today: learn how to facilitate when you're not a facilitator. And if you are, this is a train the trainer. Learn methods for setting up the social space for facilitation. Learn methods for how to generate ideas, refine ideas, and decide between ideas. We're gonna give you a framework to follow with that. So be looking out for that. Learn basics of group processes and asking good questions, the foundation of all facilitation and coaching. Agreements for today: be prepared to participate. Keep yourself on mute unless you'd like to speak, and we absolutely invite that. Ask questions in the chat and chat to everyone. So if Brian misses it, I'll see it, vice versa. Maybe Angie gets to it faster. Webcams on if background and bandwidth allow. We love to see you, but we of course understand things happen, and you may not be able to do it. Oh, thanks for editing that. What do you said? Let's make it on the fly edit and make a request. Make requests. So that means if there's something you want to know, ask. And what else would be an agreement that you would like to have in order to be successful for this evening?
So think of this as an opportunity to gather your favorite agreements. So if there's any agreements that you use, go ahead and voice them. You can go off mute. We'll capture them here. And so this will become, you could consider it almost like a pick list that you can use when you're designing your next meeting. So what are some agreements that you all like to use? Just go ahead and go off mute. What have you heard? What do you like yourself?
Aretha.
Aretha? Tell me about Aretha.
Aretha Franklin.
Ah, respect. Okay, so tell me about that. How does that show up?
That shows up because you respect the group, and people love that, because who doesn't love Aretha Franklin? And some people say, "Oh, I'll be frank." The other thing is Vegas, where what's said here stays here, and we can all be honest and share with each other. And then the last one is Disney, because we want to try and have some fun.
I love it. I feel like we just encircled the globe with all of that. Okay, have fun.
Yeah, I would add assume positive intent.
Okay. And then Nancy, what does it mean if we're assuming positive intent? What does that look like?
That looks like looking for ways for people to be right, not wrong.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Look for ways for people to be right, not wrong.
Not wrong.
Love that. Any other agreements that you'd like to add to this list? Okay. Lauren, a little bit about roles, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Also, side note, learn to collect facilitation modalities, agreements, principles, and energizers like a library. I have my own little spreadsheet of agreements, principles, and I just added a couple of the wonderful ones that you all added in there. Roles. So your role as participants is to practice where it's safe. There's no pressure here. There's no actual participants that you are facilitating. So this is an opportunity for you to play and practice where it's safe and to ask clarifying questions, just like make requests. Please, if you have questions, speak up and ask them either in the chat. We will monitor that, or as it seems, as there's space and time in verbally. Brian and I are facilitating. We are here to guide, process, and answer questions. Agenda. So first, we're going to go over balcony and dance floor. Brian, do you want to set that one up?
Yeah, sure. So, well, let's see. What we're going to do is we're actually going to do something, which is to say, we're going to take you through a facilitation activity or modality. By the way, those words are interchangeable. We're going to take you through an activity, and then what we're going to do is we're going to zoom out. We're going to go from the dance floor up to the balcony and say, okay, here's why we did it this way. Here's the group process. Here's the dynamic that's underlying that. So we're going to have you do something, and then we're going to abstract out and say, here's the principles behind it.
Mm-hmm. And the power of yet. This is a new one for me, so I'm going to ask you to do this one as well.
No problem. So this is the whole idea where somebody says, well, I can't do that. Well, I can't do that yet. So this is an opportunity to stretch. You're going to see the way that Lauren and I have set this up. It may seem like, oh, well, that's not something that I want to do. I just want to draw on the wall. You can do all of these things. If you feel like there's something that you can't do, just remind yourself, I can't do that yet. So stretch. I'll just go ahead and finish these out if that's okay, Lauren. So to that point, consider this a safe space. Practice where it's safe. Before you actually jump in the deep end, this is where we practice in the shallow end of the pool. Consider this the shallow end of the pool. And then we've already hit this one, but please make requests, okay? And in fact, to that point, we already got some agreements from you. Is there anything else that you want to make sure that we cover? So do you have any sort of learning objectives? We'll get into that a little bit later, but is there anything else that you've seen or would specifically like to walk out of tonight with? You can go ahead and go off mute and just speak what's on your mind. Okay, by the way, that was what's called the one sip pause. Some of you have heard me do this one before, but as long as it takes for me to take a sip of something, that's about as long as it takes for your participants to gather their thoughts, find their way off mute, type something into chat, speak their mind. And so if you do a one sip pause, you are clearly signaling to the group that you are done speaking and you are now waiting for them to speak, okay? So that's about as long as you should wait for people to give you a response. If they haven't responded to you in the time that it takes for you to do a one sip pause, you can declare success and move on, okay? So speaking of moving on, let's go ahead and move into our first modality, which is going to be some introductions. So first question that people have when they come into an online space, actually, let's zoom out. Before we do that, let's go to the balcony on this one. I'm going to say something that's a little bit strong, but I'm going to stand by this. I think that the most important thing that you can do with any facilitation is to do a meeting startup. And unfortunately, this is something that is often skipped over. What the meeting startup does for you, it answers the 4 major questions that people have when they come into a space. Why are we here? And that's the outcomes, okay? How are we going to achieve these outcomes? And that's the agenda. That's how we're going to get there. What are you expecting from me? And that's the roles. We're actually telling people how to show up. And then finally, how do I show up? What is the social container? Why is this a safe space? And that's what the agreements achieve, okay? So again, if you do nothing else around your facilitations, do the meeting startup. If you have come across the Grove, they call this the ORs, outcome, agenda, roles, and rules. Same thing. This, I think, can make or break a facilitation. This is one of those moments of truth, okay? So any questions about the meeting startup, just as a tool or as a template before we move on? Okay, I got my one sip pause in. Let's go ahead and get you into the mural then. The 5th question that people have when they come into a meeting is, who are all these people? So I'm going to go ahead and share a link in Zoom chat, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen at the same time. Okay. And if you need to know where we are, you can just take a look at what's on the screen behind me here. So show of hands, is this your first time using Mural? I think I know most of you. I think you're all pretty good at Mural from what I understand. Yeah. First time, Benoit, right? Okay, this is pretty easy. So I dropped a link into Zoom chat. Okay. Once you're in here, just go ahead and follow the instructions that appear on the screen. We've made this exceedingly easy, right? Once you're in here, I'll pull you to the right place. What we'd like you to do is to come have a seat at the table. And what I mean by that is just double click on any one of these gray circles and type your name on it. Actually, it's a single click. Sorry, just click on any one of these gray circles and pull up a seat.
It might be double click for Mac.
That's good to know. Thank you.
I'm learning all about Mac, seeing as I just got one.
Appreciate that.
Hermika. Hi.
Hermika has decided to type her name phonetically, which is appreciated.
I love it though.
One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Who are we missing? Let's see.
So what Brian is doing now is in the background, he's also using this as a way to make sure everybody's gotten into the program. So this is really, this is a great role for a tech host too, to just double check. So I think I might want to check in at this point and say, Tim, are you having any challenges hopping into the program?
Nope, I'm good. Thanks, Lauren.
Awesome. Okay. And are there any other challenges?
Okay. And remember, Tim is like literally on the other side of the world. So it takes those ones and zeros a while to go back and forth. Okay. And Tim, if you need us to, just let us know and we can have get you seated at one of these tables. Okay.
Excellent. Oh, there he comes.
There he is.
So what we want to have you do is go ahead and introduce yourself, and we will go around the room, if you will. So if it's okay with you, actually, whoever goes first gets to choose right or left around your table, your virtual table. And we like for you to say your name, where you're from, and where are you in your learning journey on facilitation. So not your whole learning journey, not the whole thing, just where are you now? So my name is Lauren. I am from the Virginia area in the States. And where I am on my learning journey on facilitation is that I'm a facilitator and I'm also training other facilitators. Short and sweet. Who would like to go first? And again, if you go first, you get to choose right or left around your table. Hermika, ray of sunshine.
Since you said my name.
Just looking for that unmute button. There she goes.
And I have on yellow today. Hermika Ray. I am from the Northern Virginia area. In fact, I'm in Chantilly. Where am I? I am always sharpening my pencil, so I do facilitate, and I'm also a Luma facilitator in training, but I'm always looking to learn more and how to get better. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Hermika. And we will share a link to Luma Institute in the chat in just a second. That is a wonderful training institute academy for specific modality or toolkit in design thinking. That's a toolkit that Brian and I use a lot. So Hermika, since you went first, you get to choose. Would you like to go up to Gary or over to Nancy?
I'm going to go right to Nancy.
And then we'll keep going. We'll keep going around that direction.
Great. So I am Nancy Heyer. I'm in Brentwood, Tennessee, which is right outside Nashville. And I do a lot of facilitation of meetings and classes in the context of a job at a university. And I just love learning. So I'm really excited to be in this class tonight. And Angela, you're next.
I am. Hi, everybody. I'm Angela Krieg, or Angela, depends on what you want to call me. And I am primarily an illustrator and a scribe. So facilitation is something that is still kind of out of my ballpark. And as I've been around amazing facilitators for the last 2 years, I've started to kind of really want to learn, what does it mean to be a facilitator? And so this is kind of one of the first steps in the journey to figure out how to facilitate. So thank you for putting this together, everybody.
Over to you, Gary. Yep, there he goes.
So I'll just say good evening, good afternoon. My name's Gary. I am based halfway between Peterborough and Cambridge in the UK. I've done quite a lot of facilitating, a little bit of drawing some pictures, but in the UK we've gone back into sort of restrictions, so I'm having to go back to working with Mural and Zoom, and I'm telling you my life story. I feel so relaxed being here tonight. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Gary. And Gary, why don't you tap the next table on the shoulder? Who should go next? There he goes.
Let's learn that. That's so 2020, isn't it? How about Tim?
Hello, Ray. Thanks, Gary. This is Tim. I'm from Singapore, originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, but been in Singapore most of my adult life. I do primarily graphic facilitation and training, and we also do facilitation of meetings at times, small ones, big ones. If it's big ones, I enjoy doing co-facilitation, but I'm always looking at how to get better at it. You know, if it's something we're doing on our own, or, you know, there's often times where we're co-facilitating and we're leading a part of it based on how we have created a visual, how that's serving the group, and a certain process that it's attached to. So I enjoy that part, but it's also a learning edge for me. There's a part that I don't enjoy, but I realize I enjoy it more when I'm better at it. So yeah, and I'm always curious and love learning new stuff, and I appreciate the opportunity to join you this morning. Thank you.
And Brian, explain the knife.
Well, it's his learning edge.
Oh, got it. Okay, just wanted to make sure that there was nothing violent happening anyway. And Tim, if you would like to please choose the next person at your table.
Choose Benoit.
Hi there. I was scared. I saw the knife and I said, if he choose me, is he throwing knife at me? I'm Benoit. Sorry for the accent. I'm French Canadian. I'm from Montreal. So I tried to get rid of the accent for many years, never been able to. My journey in facilitation, I'm greener than green. I'm working corporate job in a construction company. I've been to a lot of meetings. Some of them we had people facilitating them. Some of them we don't. But I always been interested into that side. Recently, with being a lot at home with COVID over the last year or two, I discovered the joy of visual thinking and sketchnoting and drafting. So I'd like to incorporate that a lot more in my work, and along the side of it, see if there's something I can bring back to the corporate world of my work, some facilitation, and trying to get them to think more visually. And well, I guess we're going to go with Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm from the Virginia area. I'm really a researcher and librarian. So I do a little bit of visual, recording and sketchnoting, but I don't usually facilitate. I'm usually in a facilitation if I'm in a meeting as a participant.
Excellent. And as you probably saw, that the S word there in the bottom left is just a little Easter egg. I don't want to set everyone's iPhones off, so I won't say it. So welcome everybody. We are a proud international audience now, so never lose your accent. We love it. We love having you all here, and so glad that we can all come together in this space. So now you have a little bit of an idea of who's in the room, and just like Brian said, balcony dance floor. So you were just on the dance floor. And now we're going to go up to the balcony and say, why do something like what we just did? Who would like to answer that?
I think if you give people an opportunity to contribute on something easy, like introducing themselves, they're much more comfortable contributing when you get to more difficult questions where you want to engage the group.
Yeah, just a little bit of trust building right in the beginning. Yeah. What else?
You get to talk, and then it's easier after if you have to talk again. For people that are introverts, they break the barrier with some easy question from where you're from, what's your name. But then again, once everybody has spoken, you're less shy and you'll be able, you're going to talk more easily.
Absolutely. And how might you do this if you had 2 minutes, that's all you got for the meeting?
Check in is one word.
One word check-in. Perfect. Yeah. Awesome. What else? What other ideas?
Introduce yourself in 10 seconds or less. Give us your name, concentration, and who you worked for over the summer.
Nice. Yeah. What if you had 30 seconds to do an intro? Angie? Yeah.
Maybe kind of like a popcorn, almost just like say your name and see who comes out, either that or put it into the chat and into a chat storm.
Yeah. Awesome.
You could do just tell one of your favorite things. So I'm Gary and I like curry.
Go.
You know what I mean? That's
Excellent.
true story, by the way. Anyway.
Oh, I'm so glad to know that. Okay.
So when I teach a process improvement class and I have students introduce themselves and give us their name, who they work for over the summer, and tell us a process that you've encountered that really needs to be improved.
Love it. Something related to the topic at hand.
Content.
Ready, go. And excellent. So all of the above, and absolutely you could do intros in chat if you didn't have enough time. Brian, what else? I just had one that slipped my mind, but what else have you used as breakout groups? You could do breakout groups, go into breakout groups for 5 minutes and come back. If you have a group of 40, you can't go around everyone. Go into breakout groups for 5 minutes, come back, one person shares something that they learned about their group. Sorry, Brian, over to you.
No, that's a great one. And I would say that this is one often we see that the introductions often get left behind. Let me just paint a picture for you. This is my nightmare of a meeting. Okay, everybody, we all know each other. We all know why we're here. Let's just go ahead and get to work. I hate that. I've been in meetings like that, and it's just a nightmare because those are two assumptions that you just cannot make. It doesn't matter how high performing the team is. You can't assume that people have read their email, that they're primed, that they know what's going on, or that they don't want to just connect with each other as human beings for a second, right? And so what doing the introductions does is that it builds that trust at a minimum level, and you need trust if you're actually going to have a productive meeting. By the way, Nancy, I love what you said about tell us about a process that you've used. Oftentimes people will look at energizers and they will do energizers that quite frankly are a waste of time. And to me, here's the criteria for what makes it a useful energizer versus a waste of time. If you are priming people towards the right mindset for the meeting, in other words, if you're having them do something that is in some way relevant to the outcomes, that's a good energizer. If on the other hand, you're just having people do something that's completely out there, like, give me your favorite movie. It's like, okay, that's kind of interesting, but that's not necessarily relevant to the meeting. Time is precious. So just like Nancy had suggested, give us a process that you've used. What that does is it puts people in the right mindset. This is a real critical moment. And there is the idea of what's called psychological priming. You can use an energizer like a team portrait to get people into the right mode of communication that you're going to keep them in for the rest of the day. Okay. With that in mind, I have a favor to ask. Whatever you do, never, ever, ever, ever use 2 truths and a lie as an energizer. It's a terrible idea. We're going to kick this meeting off by building mistrust with each other. I'm going to have you lie to your neighbors, right? And tell them a couple of lies and then watch for those lies. It's just that stuff, it gets in you and it's tough to get out. Use that as an opportunity, use the energizer as an opportunity to prime the behavior that you want to have. Okay. Lauren, anything else you want to say about introductions before we move on?
Just that you'll notice that Brian and I are capturing nuggets of knowledge throughout the mural board, and you'll be able to access this link afterwards. So if you miss a note, just know it's on here at any time. If you lose where we are, just click either my image or Brian's image at the bottom of your mural board, and you'll get right to where we are. So I was just taking notes on that. Mural scribing, of course, we love our hand-drawn scribing, and there's also a role for quick scribing nuggets on a mural board, so that as also a different type of visual scribe.
Yeah. And Tim's comment in chat hits the nail on the head. Building trust is building psychological safety. Without that psychological safety, you don't have inclusion. Without inclusion, you are not bringing in diversity of ideas. If you're not bringing in diverse ideas, you're not making the best decisions, and you're wasting people's time. So this is all of the same stuff: building trust, building safety, creating inclusion. Before we move off of introductions, I just want to open it up and see if there's any questions before we go on to the next thing, which is really the framework that we're going to introduce to you to think about a good group decision-making process. So questions, comments up until this point? Okay, cool. I'm going to put you on mute just because I use the participant window as a way of knowing who wants to talk. And what I mean by that is that if I see you go off mute, I will take that as a sign that you want to talk. Now, having said that, for about the next, I don't know, 5 minutes or so, for as long as it takes me to walk through the framework, I'm not going to have my eyes on that. I'm actually going to have my eyes over here. So let me walk you through a way of thinking about a good group decision-making process. Let's see if I can get this to start up again. Sometimes my camera doesn't always want to work. Hey, there we are. So here's one way that you could think about meetings. All right. So in general, meetings are pretty good at coming up with a purpose. Remember those outcomes that we had before? Having that problem statement. So for example, we're here to do a strategic plan, or we're here to do some team building, or we're here to do some, I don't know, business planning of some kind, or here's the problem that we want to solve. And then what we do after that, thanks for the spotlight, Lauren, then what we do after that is we start jamming on ideas. We brainstorm, or we do ThinkRight Shares, or we do go-arounds, or round robins, or brain writing, or whatever it is. But the point is that we start saying, well, what if we did this? Or what if we did that? Or what if we did that? Or what if we did that? Okay? And we start jamming on ideas. Now, usually this is how most meetings kick off. And then they usually go in two directions after that. Either the boss says, okay, I've heard what I want to hear, and this is what we're doing. And what that does is that leaves people out here in the wings thinking, well, what the heck? We just started to jam on ideas, and all of a sudden, this guy said we're doing that. That sort of leaves me out in the cold. And these people are not engaged. They're not a part of the process, and they certainly don't have personal accountability over the outcomes of this thing. So the leader says we're doing this. More often what happens with these meetings is that we just keep jamming, and we keep talking and keep talking and keep talking until we get to the end of the meeting, however long it is. And people leave thinking, well, what did we actually decide? What did we talk about, right? I do a lot of work for the government. It seems like a lot of those meetings end like that. We end at the end of the hour, whatever it is, and we're like, okay, where did that leave us? So there's got to be a turn of some kind, okay? And a good decision-making process will ease you through that turn. And in that turn, you're going to ask more questions. You're going to say, like, for example, well, do we have the money to do any of these ideas? Or which of these ideas is going to have the most impact? Or which of these ideas is going to be the easiest? And you could define that in any number of ways, like, do we have the money or the time or the resources? Or we'll do some, or let's just vote on it. We'll say, who's all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Or maybe we do something like a fist of five, right? So hold up 5 fingers if you really agree with this idea, or just show me a fist if this is really not the idea for you. Or again, drawing from the Grove, the gradients of agreement is another way. And we'll cover some of these. But all of these are decision-making methods, So are things like, again, voting, or you could do a 2x2 to say, what's most impactful and the easiest, and we'll pick the stuff that's easiest and most impactful. But there's a moment here where we come up with our decision criteria. And then once we've got our decision criteria, we apply it. We say, okay, well, this idea is really part of this idea, and we can cluster those together. Or we don't really have to do this idea, but we absolutely have to do this idea. Or we should do this idea and then this idea and then this idea. And what I'm getting at here is that there's planning that happens, okay? There's sequencing, there's planning, there's combining, until we walk out saying, okay, we know that Lauren's doing this, Tim's doing that, Nancy's doing this, and we've got our plan and we've got our way forward. And so this is a model for, I think, what is really good group decision making. And so there's a couple of different names for this. You may have heard of this before as divergence and convergence. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, that's one way of looking at this. Another way is to think of this as opening to new ideas, refining those ideas, and then closing on ideas, okay? So opening, refining, and closing. And I'll tell you, I like this language a little bit better because if you're familiar with divergence, convergence, Sam Kaner, who really modeled that, he did some really, really great stuff, and I love his work, except that he sort of called this refining portion right here, he called it the groan zone. And so he sort of disparaged on that shift that happens between opening and closing. And I think that that's really an important turn that has to happen. And because, by the way, this is not just a model for the way that decisions are made and meetings happen, it's also a model for human beings. There are openers. There are people who love to jam on ideas. They say, well, what if we did this? What if we did that, right? How about this idea? And then there are those people who are refiners. They ask really good, tough questions. Like, well, what happened last time we tried this? Or do we have enough money or resources or time to be able to pull this off? And then we have closers, people who are like, look, I don't want to be part of the sausage making. Just show me the hill to take and I will figure out how to get there. Okay. So not only is this a process for how decisions happen, it's also a way of looking at people. And so if you actually share this model with your team, the teams that you're working with, you can say, look, we are going to have moments that are going to be opening and refining and closing throughout this whole process. And so if we are coming to the end, if we're closing and you're an opener, this may not be the time to throw out a brand new idea. And likewise, if we're jamming on ideas and brainstorming, if we're opening and you know that you're a refiner, this may not be the time to ask, well, why is this going to work? And do we know that we're going to have ROI on that? And likewise, if we are refining questions, if we're asking about, well, do we really want to do this? And what's the process? And how do we make this work? This might not be the time, if you're a strong closer, to say, well, just tell me what to do, right? So across this process, you're going to have to flex. Just understand that we're going to have moments for opening, refining, and closing, okay? So what we're going to do from here on out is we're actually going to show you some of our favorite modalities to open, refine, and close, okay? Before we jump into that, I just want to check in and see if there are any questions on the model that I just shared. Yeah, Angela, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm curious because I've seen it before, including workshops where maybe a refiner or a closer is trying to close or refine during that opening, and they don't. For the people who maybe aren't working with the process as well, how do you have tricks to keep things moving forwards? Do you usually just try to set that boundary right away, or?
I'll just give you the answer on this one. The one that I do anyway in times like that is like, you know what, that's a fabulous question. Like, let's say that it's a closer, right? You know, somebody who says like, just tell me what to do. I said, well, we will absolutely get to that. And we also want to have the discussion to make sure that we're all heard. Here's what more often than the closer showing up early, the refiner shows up early. Right?
Yeah, the critic.
It's really the critic, or that's how it shows up anyway. And so what you do is you honor that, and you just say, and here's where we're going to get to it. Bob, that is a fabulous question. We don't know if we've got the money to do this. We are absolutely going to take a look at that and other issues. For right now, let's figure out what the options are that are available to us. So let's hold the aperture open. I'm going to write down your question. We'll make sure that we get back to it. It's just that at this exact point in the process, this may not be the time. Let's hold the aperture open. Because here's the other thing, going back to that model that I just drew a second ago, the other thing that happens is that sometimes you get 2 or 3 or 4 ideas out, and all of a sudden the group will start jumping onto one of those ideas. I think it's our job as a facilitator to hold that aperture open and go past the 2 or 3 or 4 ideas to get to the 12 or 13 or 14 ideas. Because oftentimes that's where the introverts who have been thinking about this for a while, they will have found their voice. And that's where the people who have really been able to do a little bit more thinking and synthesizing and listening to what's going on, that they will suggest other solutions that may be better than that first, second, or third. Okay. All right.
The other thing I've seen you do, Brian, I know I've done this, and it will clarify what I wrote in the chat, is to give people a role, especially if they start to get frustrated. One of my favorite things is when it comes time for the clustering, to say who is just really good at coming up with patterns and seeing a storyline across multiple ideas. And you'll get people who will raise their hand who are much better than me at seeing patterns and ideas, and they can they can really help with the process. So being sure to respect each part of the process and acknowledge, maybe that person that opened up the refiner role a little early, you celebrate that when it's time to refine and say, so-and-so, this is really where we need your voice. What are we missing here? What do we need to think through? So you can start to use folks in a way that they really appreciate that strength.
Yeah, that is such an important point that I want to underscore just a little bit more. The thing that we're trying to do here is to unlock people's strengths, right? It is really to honor people's diverse strengths and have them show up in the role where they are most comfortable. Is anybody here familiar with a facilitation method called the 6 hats? Anybody heard of that one? Okay, Angela, a little bit. Hermika's nodding. Tim has. Nancy has. Okay. I don't like the 6 hats, and I'll tell you why. The problem with the 6 hats is that you're forcing people to adopt roles that they don't normally naturally take. You're saying, okay, go ahead and put your white hat on. Well, I'm not a white hat kind of guy. I'm a red hat kind of guy. If we're doing this right, we're allowing people to show up from a position of strength where they're most comfortable, and we're carving out roles for them where they can be at their best in this process, right? Our number one assumption as facilitators is that the knowledge is in the room. What we have to do is design processes that allow all knowledge and all roles to have a place. Okay, cool. Let's, I just want to check and see if there's anything else. Yeah, Nancy.
So Laura, I want to ask Lauren if she'll repeat if you give an example of how you tapped people's skills again. You said it, but I was taking notes and I missed it.
The number one role that I often hand out, because this is not a skill that I necessarily have, is there someone who's really good at looking for patterns and seeing a storyline across a lot of data, what things really go together. So I think it's also recognizing what are some of the things that you might struggle with as a facilitator, and can you lean on the group to help you with those things, and then feel really special too. It also reduces the power dynamic when you bring more people to the process. Right. So that's always a positive.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for asking.
Lauren, I'm happy to queue up the next thing. In that little beat, I was able to get my head together. You ready? Okay, so here's what we're going to have you do. We are going to ask you to actually focus on the left side of this triangle. Actually, well, let me say, we are going to take you through a facilitated process. In fact, you are going to take yourselves through a facilitated process. So based on where you sat, which is to say where you put your name on those tables, that's now your group. Okay, I've already got the breakout set up. What we're going to have you do is we're going to take you through processes of opening, refining, and closing, with one goal in mind. And that goal, which we've randomly assigned, is to put together a parking lot circus. And here's what I mean by that. We're going to assume that we all work for the same organization. You can pick whatever it is, doesn't matter. And that we've decided that we're going to throw a circus in the parking lot. So that's the goal. Okay, we're going to throw a circus in the parking lot. Now, the first modality that we're going to have you do is what's called a ThinkRight Share. This comes from the Army Red Team School. This is one of my favorite modalities for brainstorming, for opening up. And so let me tell you exactly how we're going to do this. We're going to put you into breakouts. Everybody, not yet. I see you guys starting to write already. Well, we're going to put you into breakouts. You're going to have 60 seconds to do nothing but think about this. Okay. Then you're going to have 60 seconds to write your ideas. Okay. So table 1, who is, by the way, Jen, Benoit, and Tim, you're going to put your ideas right here. Okay. Table 2, which is Gary, Hermika, Angela, and Nancy, you're going to put your ideas right here. Okay. What are your ideas about how we might create a parking lot circus? What are the things that we're going to have to keep in mind? How do we actually make this happen? So you've got the goal. How do we create a circus in the parking lot? How do we do that? So you're going to have 60 seconds to do nothing but think about it. Then you're going to have 60 seconds to do nothing but write about it. You can type as many sticky notes as you can. 1 idea per sticky, please type on your tables. And then once you've got the thinking and the writing done, I'm going to put you into breakouts and you'll do a quick go around and share your ideas. Okay. So what are your questions before I start the 60-second clock? For just thinking, no typing. So all you got to do is think about it. Benoit, do you have a question about this?
I do have. So circus parking lot, you're literally trying to put a circus in a parking lot. Is that what we're thinking about?
You're literally trying to put a circus in a parking lot.
Okay.
Cool. That's the question. Remember, that's that first point of divergence. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start the 60-second timer on Mural. 60 seconds to do nothing but think about this. How might you do that? Go. Okay, that's 60 seconds. Go ahead and type as many ideas as you can into your respective tables right here. Okay, that was about 60 seconds. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put you into breakouts. You are only going to have 5 minutes. That is not enough time to do anything more than to read through these sticky notes. So this is not the time to start refining. All you're going to do is you're going to hear from each other just enough to explain the idea, and we will see you back in 5 minutes. See you soon. Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. I'm seeing a lot of smiles. Looks like you had a little bit of fun. Okay, so that was an opening modality. You could have just as easily done something like brainwriting or brainstorming if you like, and we'll share a resource for you at the end with all different kinds of methods. We just wanted to show you one each. Lauren.
Pick me. What's brainwriting?
I'll share that at the end if that's okay. But before we go on to the next modalities, which are in the refining section of this, I just want to open it up and see if there are any questions, comments, what came up for you. Angela shared a Spotify playlist, which is amazing. So how did this go? How was the ThinkRight Share? Let me hear from you. Yeah, Gary.
Amazing. We have actually run away to the circus. We're leaving this meeting now, and we're going to the parking lot. It was like one of those little moments. I loved it.
You're there. You've got it. At first, you're like, "What parking lot? What? I don't get it." But now you're like, "Okay, we're there." Amazing. Anybody else? How did this go? ThinkRight Share. Yeah, Tim.
Yeah, it also spontaneously highlighted, the different types of people. I think I think Benoit said, "I'm definitely an opener." I think because he had a lot of ideas, I guess. And then Jen said, "I think in honesty, I'm a refiner." So it also led it to a little bit of that insight and self-disclosure as well.
Yeah. And thank you for bringing that up, Tim. What I'll say is that after I introduce opening, refining, closing as a concept, I often ask my participants to say, okay, just take a minute and silently to yourself identify where do you fall across these. Do you see yourself more as an opener, refiner, and closer? And so what that does is that builds a little bit of self-awareness so that if we're doing something like a ThinkRight Share, the closers are like, okay, I need to flex into this, and the refiner's like, I just need to breathe. They're preparing themselves for something that might be outside of their place of strength. Nancy, I saw that you went off mute for a second. Did you have a thought on this one?
Actually, it was the same thing Tim just said. That it helped us. It helped all of us. We came at it from different points of view. So it was Anyway, it was good.
Okay, I appreciate that. So let me just say this, I like ThinkRight Share better than brainstorming. And the reason I like it a little bit better than brainstorming is because if you're following Osborne's rules of brainstorming to the letter, it's typically done verbally and one person at a time. That there's not really a writing function that happens. And so what happens with brainstorming is that the first idea influences the following ideas. If you give people a ThinkRight Share, what happens is that you get the unvarnished, unbiased ideas of everybody in the room, which means you're getting the most diverse ideas that are coming in. The other thing is that this works both for introverts and extroverts. The introverts get their thinking time just to gather their thoughts. The extroverts get to talk about it just a little bit. Okay. So of all of the opening modalities that are out there, ThinkRight Share is my favorite. That's my go-to. It's the one that I use all the time. Okay. All right. Any questions about this before we move on to our next, which is going to be a refining method?
I was actually wondering, Hermika, oh, I'm so glad you went off mute. It's like you knew I was going to ask you a question. Well, I want you to ask you a question. And then I was also wondering if you might want to highlight one of a different opener exercise from Luma that you like, because I know that there's a couple ones in there. If you want to, no pressure.
Yes. Can I get my question out? Because before I forget. So the question I have is, everybody that I work with doesn't have Mural. And if you were in the room, we'd have a ton of stickies. What other way would you be able to do this, if there is another way in the context of this meeting here today?
Yeah. So the easiest way to do it would be to use whatever tools available. And in the case of, like, say, for example, you're using Microsoft Teams, you've got a couple of options that are available to you. So you could use, for example, a Teams document, and they just type their thoughts into a shared document, or easier than that even, just use the chat function of whatever meeting platform that you happen to be using. We're using Mural just because it's here. This could just as easily be type your idea into chat. Okay.
And Lauren, I just put in there, for some reason, the environments I'm in, they like Affinity clustering, but for an opening, they love rose thorn. I'm going back to when it used to be bud thorn. Rose thorn bud as a way of opening up. Why are we here? What are we solving for? If you already have a problem statement.
That's really interesting. I always saw rose,
and I always
thorn,
feel like
bud.
It's in the middle.
I thought so too. I thought that'd be more of a refining function.
To me, it feels like it's in the middle where we're going to, before we go to clustering, things like that. But people start to gravitate to certain things that they like. And I think they like the thorn piece. But that's naturally I wouldn't naturally offer that in the beginning.
So Hermika, just for you, a couple of other openers that are out of the Luma deck of cards. What's on your radar is an opener.
Yes.
So that's a good one to get people, sharing their ideas. Another one is journaling. That's really close to the ThinkRight Share. I would say the persona profile is another one that does really well at opening. The cover story mockup is another one. Concept mapping is a fabulous one.
Yes, I use
opening. That. And then I think there's one other one that I was thinking of.
Alternative worlds.
Alternative worlds is a great one.
Yes.
Yep.
So here's alternative worlds so it's really, you can get more creative with an opener simply by coming up with a different kind of question. And so we're throwing out all these modalities, but really all they are is how you form the question. Yeah. So a rose is, what's an idea that you really love? Right, Hermika? And then a thorn is, what's an idea that you don't love as much? And the rose, a bud is, what's an idea that could open up further, or what's an idea that's got future potential?
Yes. Right. I have a set of questions for each one of them versus giving them the chart. It's
all about the question. It goes back to and then the alternative worlds is, how might fill in the blank company? So we like, how might Netflix, how might Tesla, how might the Humane Society, how might fill in the blank company approach this problem? And if you've ever read, it's kind of a classic, A Whack on the Side of the Head, which is, it's a creative whack. It's just throwing something else in there to get the brain turning. And now, Gary, you're going to have to tell us about BBB.
When you're trying to get people away from just, I've only got 4 ideas or 4 post-its, it's saying, right, okay, so imagine there was no constraints, so blue sky thinking, okay, benchmarking, just like you said, who else is solving this problem that we can copy how they're doing it, and back to basics at the simplest form. Use a pencil, you know, so just to try and just get people generating more juices. That's all. So that's I use. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And a great meeting agreement as well, something you could even bring up in the beginning of the meeting to encourage that mindset. So Brian is demoing one of the wonderful features about Mural, which is that you can copy paste, which is not something that you could do very quickly when you're in the room, but is very easy when you're using an online tool like Mural or even a document. You can quickly copy and paste ideas from the opening space into the refining space. Now, why might you want to do that? Why might you want to have a duplicate version of your stickies from the ThinkRight Share to the Affinity clusters?
To know where it comes from, to know who's generated the idea, and
Kind
to
of see
the trajectory, the journey.
Absolutely.
And it also creates a sense of ownership in the process.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, great. Yeah, it creates a sense of ownership. You can see the journey. So many times groups want to go back and say, how did we get there? And so you can really see that when you do the copy paste. So if you scan over from ThinkRight Share to Affinity clusters, and you can do that by simply clicking and dragging your mouse, or holding down the space bar if you have a Mac, or you can simply click my picture on the bottom and you'll get to what we're looking at. And I just have to pause and laugh because I think the first sticky on table 1 says animal feces. So I'm really curious about that conversation. So what you're going to do with affinity clustering, and affinity clustering is just a fancy word for clustering, is group similar ideas together. So Brian, I imagine you want to stay in the big group for this, right? We're not going to breakouts.
No, I think we should do breakouts if that's all right. I've got them all queued up. Yep, they're ready to go.
Okay, I'll let you set it up then. Take us to breakouts.
Okay, so we're going to give you 8 minutes for this now. Before, you were showing up as participants. So here's what the challenge is, and this is going to be a challenge. I would like somebody to volunteer to facilitate this process. Okay, so what that means is and here, let me be very, very specific about this. Sometimes I say that and people say, well, that means I've got to do the work. Absolutely not. Facilitators, you don't do the work. You channel the work of other people. And so here's the kinds of prompts that you're going to share. Okay, so if you take on the role of facilitation, you're going to say things like this. All right, so let's take a look at these ideas that we've come up with. What is similar? What belongs together? What do we want to group in the same place? Okay, animal feces, toilets. We'll link those two together. I can see how we might cluster those. Just reading what's there, folks. You know, and so the point is that you're not doing the work. You're leveraging the knowledge that is in the room. You're having your participants do the work. You are asking questions, moving stickies, and that's it. If you are putting your own thoughts out there, you're not facilitating, you're consulting, and that's a different job, okay? Your insurance is going to be a lot higher once you start consulting. So once we put you into breakouts, somebody volunteer to be the facilitator. So practice this. And you'll have about 8 minutes. If you don't get through all of them, that's perfectly okay. But 8 minutes to try to come up with some affinity clusters with the ideas that you've come up with. What are your questions before I open up the breakouts again? Nancy.
So what is the objective of the affinity clustering activity?
Okay, the objective of the affinity clustering activity is to come up with groups of like ideas. Okay, like this one that I just demonstrated right there. Okay. Thank you for that.
I think we got distracted by the feces. So I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
That is a little distracting. Yep.
You can, so if it makes sense, you could also, I like to sometimes use the draw tool in Mural to draw little amoebas around your groups and even label them with a different colored sticky. So that would be sort of level 2, but level 1 is simply grouping similar ideas together. This is right in the middle of the process. So of course, what's coming after this is the closing, but we're not there. Yeah, we're just grouping.
Okay, any other questions before we open up the breakouts? All right, we'll see you back in 8. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back.
So inevitably, what always happens at the end of the breakout group is that you may have been the person that got cut off when everyone got yanked back. And so if you were that person and you feel comfortable completing your thought in the chat, please go ahead and do so, because your group really wants to hear how that sentence is going to end. So how did that go? So you don't have to debrief what you talked about, but at balcony level, how was that process of clustering? What worked? Yeah.
Yeah, it went really well. Something I mentioned right at the end, we came up with the 3 Ps of people, plan, promotion, about how we clustered things. But it reminds me a lot of a workshop that Brian taught, I think it was last week, about systems thinking. And is this facilitation method that we're really going over tonight, is it all circling around systems thinking, or is it just one method within a facilitator's toolbox?
Interesting. So systems thinking can actually, systems thinking does follow open, refine, close. So systems thinking starts with brainstorming the parts of the system and then refining them and grouping the parts of the system and figuring out how they connect. That's all refining, and then closing with the insights about what you've now learned. So a systems thinking, it's so hard to sort of articulate. There's open, refine, close, which is sort of like a framework. And then there's systems thinking, which is a modality that runs the gamut of that framework. And then there's something like the alternative worlds, how might Netflix do this, which is a modality that just sits really in the opening space. So you've got framework, you've got processes, I'll call it systems thinking, a process, and then you've got modalities. So you'll hear another example, Angie, to your point, is open space. Open space is a process, and a lot of open space is mostly an opener, but can include a refine and a close process, and you might insert other modalities into it. So hopefully that makes sense, but I wanted you to kind of differentiate between a process umbrella and a modality activity. Yay. Okay. That was a good one. And I absolutely agree that because you're in this tool, having used the arrows, you're getting and connecting ideas together, you've now got more into systems area. What other insights came up from this?
Okay. So let me just say, clustering ideas, whether it's called clustering or affinity diagrams, it's all the same stuff. That is an essential part of the process, because what happens is that you can find that some people will have created the same idea. So with the clustering move, that's where you're deduplicating, you're finding where are those things that have a parent-child relationship to them, the things that really should be brought together. Okay. The next refining method that we want to share with you is called dot voting. And let me show you what this would look like if we were in the room together. If we were in the room together, we would have a whole bunch of sticky notes laid out across the board. And what I would do is I would pass out a bunch of these things. Okay. So these are sticker dots, they're kind of tiny. They're just circle stickers. And here's what I would say. Okay, so we've got, so many ideas. If there's one idea that you've got a whole lot of energy around, you can take all 4 of your dots and go bam, bam, bam. And if you put all 4 dots on one idea, then that's the one that is most important to you. If, on the other hand, you've got 4 ideas that you say, it's like, well, I can live with all of these, and you can spread your ideas around. So this is what's called a weighted dot vote, okay? It's where participants can spread their dots around given the amount of energy that they have for any idea. Now, here's why this is such a cool idea in terms of decision-making process. What it does is it allows people's, the degree to which people advocate for an idea to actually show up and come forward. The problem with one person, one vote is that if somebody's, it's kind of, I'm sort of ambivalent about voting for this guy, right? Where somebody else is like, no, this is really super important, we should vote for this guy. That's going to get tamped down in a one person, one vote process. So doing something like a weighted dot vote, it allows people to vote where their energy is. Okay. Now, Benoit, you got a question about this?
Excellent question, more a comment.
Yeah.
I've been into a meeting like that once or twice, and we actually had 5 dots, 4, 5, 3, I guess it doesn't really matter. But it was surprising that before going in, you would think that the 2 or 3 main ideas were these one. And after voting, those 2 or 3 weren't even on the list because they were given by loudmouth or extrovert and people that are taking a lot of space in the room. But all of the people weren't talking, didn't vote for those ideas, and it's another list of ideas that came out after. So it was very interesting to see that happening.
Absolutely. And to your point, and to Lauren's comment in the chat, this is where you're actually giving the silent anonymous a vote, right? Where you're bringing their voice into the room. I really, really like doing dot voting, even if I've already done another refining activity. So Jen, you're going to appreciate this. I did a what's called an impact implementation matrix, a 2x2 for a federal agency, okay, that will go unnamed. And what they were doing is they were trying to decide like what programs are we actually going to do. And so we had across this 2x2, an importance difficulty matrix in Luma. That's the same thing. Across this 2x2, they had all of those programs. Now, dummy me, I had assumed that they were going to pick the ones that were easiest and had the most impact. But I was just watching the body language as we did this 2x2, and people were getting real itchy with where this was going. Like they were kind of like crossing their arms and like sticking their hands in front of their faces. I'm like, okay, yeah, exactly like what Gary's doing right now. Like that body language is what I was picking up from folks. And I was like, okay, let's just do a dot vote. And I passed out a bunch of stickers, right? And I said, against this 2x2, right, we've done impact and importance. Which ones are we actually going to do? And lo and behold, what they ended up choosing were the ones that were the toughest and had the lowest impact. And I said, okay, guys, I might not be the brightest crown in the box, but why are you going to do the things that are the toughest and are not going to have the most impact? And they said, well, Brian, we're a federal agency. This is what Congress tells us to do. I'm like, okay, got it. Nobody wants to do it. They're not funded. It's not going to have an impact, but because Congress tells them they got to do it, that's what they're going to do. So what the point is that the dot vote is a really, really great way of just figuring out where people stand on their ideas. So here's how we're going to do this. We're not going to do this in breakouts. I've pulled you to the right part of the mural. Now, if you're familiar with the way that Mural works, it can be a little tricky if you're doing multiple dot votes at the same time, okay? Because what happens is that it'll get a little bit watered down if people are voting in different sections on different things. It's great if you're having a lot of people all vote on the same stuff. But if you've got different breakouts like what we've got here, we've got to come up with something else. So here's what we're going to do. I've created a set of icons over here right next to the clusters that you've already designed. And what we're going to do for this is what's called an N/3. So that is the number of options that you've all come up with. That is the number of ideas divided by 3. That tells you the number of votes that everybody gets. So in the case of table 1, you had 21 ideas divided by 3. That gives you 7 votes. Table 2, you had 18 ideas divided by 3. That gives you 6 votes. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Grab, respectively, each one of you, 7 or 6 of those icons and drag and drop them on top of the ideas that you most want to see happen in this parking lot circus. Okay, you can go ahead and do that now. So just keep count to yourself. 7 votes if you're in table 1, 6 votes in your table 2. Drag and drop them onto the idea that you like the most with regards to this parking lot circus. You can spread them around. You can put a lot of energy onto one idea or another. Whatever works for you. Okay, it's okay if you're not finished. Again, our purpose here is just to demonstrate the methods. So this is how you might do dot voting. Again, this one's a lot easier if you're doing it in the room. People just put their stickers around. Before we move off of this, what questions do you have around dot voting?
Not really a question, but a comment. I use this for a risk assessment in project management with different color dots representing highly likely, moderately likely, and not very likely to occur and impact as well. And it works surprisingly surprisingly well.
Yeah, it's a fabulous idea. Thanks for that, Nancy. Okay. Lauren, I think I can turn it over to you.
Absolutely. So, instead of doing the last activity, because I know we want to have a little bit of time to just chat through some closing things, but if you want to meet me over in action list, or you can just follow me, pink follow button on the bottom. Always want to leave time at the end for action list, not like I'm doing right now, to make sure, Gary, thank you so much for the laughter. It's like the irony of this moment. Make sure that you have 10 minutes to pivot. If you don't, you could have a separate meeting just to do the action planning. Sometimes you have to, because people don't want to have an hour and a half, a 2 hour, 3 hour meeting to get through the whole open, refine, close. Okay, have an open meeting, have a refine meeting, have a close meeting. Oh, you didn't like, I put your action, you didn't like that?
I like this one better, and I'll tell you why. So this is one that, this is a PDF that you can actually download. This is a fillable template. In other words, people can this is a form in Acrobat. If you double click on that, you can actually type in the content of what's here. Also, I want to get at Angela's question, a question for the end. When is anonymous voting good versus a bad idea? I always like to do anonymous voting no matter what. Doesn't matter how high performing the team is, because my job as a facilitator is to make space for that dissenting opinion. And it's just easier to do that if it's anonymous. And I'm getting a thumbs up from Hermika on that one.
A couple other things I try to make space for if there's time. Sorry, I'm just going to rattle through these last couple of things, Angie, is to do a closing checkout. So a one word checkout, something you can do in 30 seconds. If you have 10 minutes, you could do one that Brian taught me, which I love. It's called a learn, do, and a thank. What is one thing you learned? What's one thing that you're going to do as a result of this session? So you get that accountability factor. And then what's one thing you would like to thank the group for? And I really want to emphasize it's a thank to the group as opposed to an individual, because then no one gets left out and doesn't get thanked. The other thing, in addition to a closed activity, as you have time, and especially for a large offsite, is to do messaging back. So always trying to make space, not only for those who are in the room, but also for those who aren't in the room, by saying, let's take a moment and just brainstorm. Why did we meet? What did we do, and what's next? And then, just like your action planning, assign an action owner. So who is it that's going to write this email or give this talk back to the organization, and by when? So Brian gave you a really great action or project planning tool, that action planning tool, that graphic game plan. It's just a simple, and it's an easy one. Is just to do, what are our next steps? And who's doing it, and by when? And it's easier said than done, because it's one of the hardest things to get the group for. So you just have to kind of, as a facilitator, rally the last string of energy you can and keep asking, what are the next steps? Okay, and who wants to put their name against this? And is there a deadline? You're not the one that's you don't have to drive it, but always remember that your goal is to make sure that everyone leaves knowing exactly what's happening next. And so even if it feels painful or like you're kind of pushing them, I still think it's a good idea to try to emphasize that, okay, who's doing this and by when? Is everyone clear? Just like the oars are missed in the beginning, this is often that last misstep. And if you don't have time, then have a second meeting if you can, or try to plan for it. So unfortunately, I know we're at the top of the hour and some folks may need to hop off. I will say that Brian and I will stay on and run through group dynamics, some of the group dynamics tips and tips for thinking on your feet. So you can stay if you want. If you have to leave, we are still going to record this, so you can finish in the recording. But before you leave, I just want to emphasize a couple of ways that you can connect with Brian and I before we hit any questions. So if you want, I'm going to summon you to this connect with us. I just want to let you know what we have going on in case you want to check in with us. Brian's got his LinkedIn. You can double click on his lovely face there and get to his LinkedIn profile. He's also got a wonderful blog of visual and virtual facilitation methods, as well as his book on virtual meetings, which is an Amazon bestseller, I believe, Surviving the Horror of Online Meetings. And it comes with a compendium website for with as well as virtual tips and tools. And if you want to connect with me, so I have an Intro to Facilitating with Visuals course. That's a soup to nuts course to get you started using visuals as a facilitator. So it's more, this is sort of facilitation for visual practitioners. The course is the other way. It's the visual side for facilitators. Then I have a hybrid ebook out. So this is Hybrid Meetings, Tips for Helping to Plan Hybrid Meetings. You can double click if you want to grab that. Got a Facebook group community, would love to get more people chatting in there. So please feel free to use it, ask questions, and promote if there's something that you're working on that's relevant. You can promote in my group. It's not spamming if it's related. And Friday coffee chats. The last one of the year is this Friday. It's an open forum coffee chat, mastermind style that we do. Gary's been there, Hamika's been there. So definitely come if you want to chat, play with Mural and play with other virtual tools or talk about other topics related to facilitation. And lastly, you can always check out my blog as well. So if you do have to leave us, I would love for you to write your checkout word, whatever word you're leaving with in the chat. It represents your current mood or feeling, your one word checkout in the chat. And if you want to stay and just grab a few extra nuggets of knowledge live, we'd love to have you.
Saying energized, happy. Okay, before you break, I want you to direct you down to the lower right-hand corner of this mural. Here is what Lauren and I have done. We have gone through what I think is, this is the one of the two pillars of my own facilitation practice. I mentioned Sam Kaner before, The Facilitator's Guide to Participatory Decision Making. I went through that book and pulled out every open-ended question that he had or every method that he had and put it on one piece of paper. I will tell you, let me just show it to you. So this is the portfolio that I always have with me when I facilitate. And if I open this up, this same document is always with me so that I can refer to it and say, okay, what is the move that I need to make from a human perspective? So this right here, again, this is always with me. Just print that up, keep that with you. This will arm you with some open-ended questions, moves, ways to manage that group dynamic. And we can go more in depth into that when we hit office hours. But if you you really got to download this before you head out. Okay. Thank you so much for your time. And I think with that, we can head into office hours. So Lauren,
Brian,
you want to talk? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
We might be saying the same exact thing. I was wondering if we may want to just do some quick hits on exactly. And I've been talking a while, so why don't you take the first few?
All right, cool. So here's the thing. There are really two worlds. There's the task world and then there's the human world. What we've been talking about so far has been task related. That is about opening, refining, closing. That's getting the job done. That's checking the box. Where group dynamics come in, that is the human world. And we as facilitators, we have to take into account the human factor. I will say that a lot of the facilitation libraries that are out there, Loma included, don't really take into account the human portion of group dynamics. Okay, that whole thing that we were talking about, diversity, bringing in diverse ideas, understanding the human space is just not there. So we just wanted to point out a few things from our background, Lauren's and my background, in really studying the psychology of group dynamics. The first one is the rule of group dynamics. And what that is if someone is thinking or feeling something, chances are somebody else is too. And so we will often use this as a principle, as a ground rule, as an agreement. If you are thinking, feeling, sensing something, go ahead and say it. What you're doing is that you are giving voice to not just to yourself, but to other people that are in the room. Yeah. Hermika, did you have a thought on that?
I did. I think, well, you've already said it, but it's really important to bring voice into the room because otherwise people check out, they disengage, or they don't take away any meaning from the meeting. So it's really not about me or the tactics or what I need to get accomplished. It's really about what's in the room and what that room needs in the moment.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And actually what that does is that takes us to the next dynamic here, which is one of open-ended questions. It is not about me, it is about the group. One of the things that you can tell, I think, the difference between a new facilitator and somebody who's been doing this for a while is the extent to which they take on the burden of whatever the group process is. And so, and here's another way of looking at it. If somebody came to me and said, okay, Brian, you've got a choice. You can either keep your markers or your questions. First of all, that would be a hard choice, but I would choose to keep my questions, because a good open-ended question is the thing that is really going to move the group. Here's the thing. If somebody puts the energy on you, they say, well, Brian, what are we supposed to do here? Or, you know, what would you do? Or what is this? That's your check engine light. That's that little, you know, ding in the back of your head that says, oh, the group is putting me on the dance floor. I need to take that energy and channel it right back onto them. So here's a question I hear all the time. Well, why are we doing this? Why are we all here? What's this all about? Why are we doing this? Okay, my check engine light's going on. Well, Bob, that's a really interesting question. You know, why are we doing this? Who can help out with that? I'm not answering the question. I'm using the group dynamics to ask an open-ended question and to put that energy right back onto the group. It's not about my answer. It's about the group coming up with its own answer. That's the difference between facilitation and consulting. So again, in that list of Kaner methods that I shared, there's a whole list of open-ended questions. I would start collecting your favorite open-ended questions. Okay. All right, Lauren, you want to take on some of these other ones?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna put a gift in the chat in a second. I have a questions library and how to ask a powerful question. So I'll put that form in the chat if you want to grab it. Angie has a question. Angie, would you mind giving us the verbal version of your question in the chat?
Yeah, I'm actually thinking of a situation that happened in a group that I was in it was actually on Nova Scribes, where someone was giving a workshop, and there was a certain member that felt like that they were fighting the process the entire way. It didn't feel like they were trying to participate. It felt like they were trying to point out everything wrong with the meeting. And so the question that I asked was, what do you do with the loudmouths or the people who make it all about them or are just fighting the process? AKA, it's like, okay, this should be an hour meeting, but this person forgets about everybody else in the room. They only wanted to be about them. Either that, or they're like, why the heck are we doing this?
All right, let's play that just a little bit out, Angela. So I want you to be that person for a second, okay? Could you just go ahead and just like as if I was facilitating and you were that guy, whoever that was, just go ahead and just lay it on me, okay?
That guy.
Yeah.
I mean, so I see that this is really like systems thinking, but I don't really get why you would do this. Like I don't understand the process. I think that I think if it takes a long time, people should could have done this in a 30 minutes if we had just kind of like picked ideas and done it more of a hierarchy. I don't really get what's the point of doing this process.
Yeah, Angela, so first of all, let me just say thank you for bringing that into the room. I'm wondering if other people are feeling the same way. Okay, so I'm seeing Hermika is nodding, Nancy's also nodding. So thank you, first of all, for bringing that into the room. I'm also wondering, is anyone else getting some value out of this? And if so, how do you see yourself applying this? How might you use systems thinking or systems mapping in some way? So again, I'm doing two things. First of all, I'm acknowledging, right? I'm giving you a little bit of like, I'm crediting you for that, because that is hard to put yourself out there and to say, hey, you know, this just isn't working for me. So I'm acknowledging. And then second, I'm looking to say, all right, who else has got an alternative view? So I'm looking for, we're not going to get into this here. I'm looking for, first of all, what's called a follow. And then I'm looking for an oppose. Okay. Hermika, what did you have on this? I saw you go on and off mute real quick.
I usually think that the person who makes the most noise has something to say, or sometimes I will actually lean into, if I'm in the room, I will lean to the person who's most quiet, who has something to say, just to kind of give them support. But it's usually they have something to say, or there may be some nervous energy around it. So the last thing I would not do is ignore it, right? Because it continues. It's like the pimple that doesn't go away. So it's really giving them voice and then supporting them, but also inviting others. So it kind of disarms some of that ideology of criticism.
Yeah. I think that's really good. because it definitely is very stressful when I'm a participant trying to enjoy a group, and there is that person who it just feels like that they're trying to fight the entire process. So thank you for that feedback.
Yeah.
Or
And I
not
don't-
feedback, you know what I mean.
No worries. And I don't know if you saw it, but really quickly, Jen, do you mind showing that again? So she just shared "Don't Just Do Something, Stand There" by, I believe, Marvin Weisbord and Sandra Janoff, if I'm remembering the authors correctly. Yep. So that's one where it's almost like, think of this as conversational Aikido, right? It's you're taking your opponent's energy and just directing it right back on them. If you're not doing that, then what's happening is that you are becoming a lightning rod for the process. And we do that anyway because we represent the process. I've had participants get in my face, stick their fingers in my chest, yell at me, scream at me, and it had nothing to do with me. It had to do with what was happening in the room with regards to the process. And so you pick that up and you just channel it right back to them. Okay? If you do that, you are always, always in safe waters.
And if you don't want to read the whole book, you can read my Cliff Notes version that I put in the chat. It's definitely a lot of it has to do with breathing. I'm not going to get into the whole story, but I saw a brilliant facilitator recently who I think handled a difficult situation really well. It was Mary Alice Arthur, actually, in Maffin session. Maybe some of you may have been there. And if you watch Mary Alice when the situation came up, she demoed the "Don't Just Do Something, Stand There" really, really well. And you could almost see her kind of take a step back and go, okay, what's happening here, and sort of observing the process and, letting things happen a bit and just not jumping in right away so that she could calm herself enough to know when is the right time to step in. And they don't teach you that in Luma. So that's where the mindfulness comes in.
I want to point out just a couple of other things that you'll get in this collection of Kaner methods that we've come up with. So a few things that we use all the time. First of all, making space for quiet people. We've talked about the introversion, extroversion dynamic. There's some ways in there where you can actually give quiet people a voice. Stacking. I'm just going to demonstrate it. Okay, so I see that there's about 4 or 5 people that want to talk at the same time. We're going to go Angela, Gary, Jim, and then Jen, and then Tim. And we'll go in that order. Now, that stacking is something that I use all the time just to make sure that we're hearing from everybody. And then if somebody tries to butt in all of a sudden in the middle of the stack, Lauren, I noticed that you're trying to weigh in here. Are you responding specifically to something that Gary brought up, or is this a new idea? Oh, it's a new idea? Okay, I'm going to ask you to wait until Tim is done with his thought. This is really hard. It's hard to keep track of who is, coming up first. So one of the things that I'll do, this is just a quick trick, is that I'll just type their names into the Zoom chat just so I've got it somewhere and not actually hit enter, right? Just so I can remember, okay, who's on first, who's on second, who's on third. So that's stacking. And then, of course, summarizing, also known as paraphrasing, that's where you would actually repeat back. Okay, Jen, here's what I heard you say. Did I get that right? And you're also asking for validation. And what you're doing is that if somebody's got a little bit of a louder voice, if they take 90 seconds to say this much, you are helping to synthesize that down into the most relevant parts to it. So those are some things that you'll get in that Kaner methods. A few other things, a few tips for thinking on your feet. First of all, you do not have to know the content. Again, use your Aikido, right? You do not have to be a subject matter expert. That's not why they're hiring you. You're there as a facilitator. Your loyalty is to the process, not to the people, and certainly not to the outcome. If you are doing anything to influence the outcome, that's a party foul. That's putting your fingers on the scale. You're not allowed to do that as a facilitator. Lord knows, Lauren and I have both been in situations where we were asked to influence the outcomes of a facilitation. And at the risk of the contract and getting paid, we both said no, because that's our ethic, right? We are there for the process, not for the outcome. If you're not sure, step back and wait. Lauren just talked about that, right? Don't say anything, just step back. And then conflict can be constructive. Here's the thing. If we have built a space of psychological safety, if we have created a container of inclusion, if we've actually done that, then what that means is that we are welcoming cognitive diversity. And if there's diversity, there's going to be difference. That's the same thing. Diversity just means difference. And if we have difference, we're going to disagree. Disagreement is a sign that you're doing things right. Conflict is a sign that you're doing it right. I get scared when people are all on the same page and they're all in agreement. That tells me that there's dysfunction there. Okay.
It also sometimes doesn't happen until sometimes the second or the third day of an offsite. And so, you know, that's one thing that has been more difficult about going virtual is that we're not taking quite as much time with some of the group dynamics and team development processes that we used to. And so some of the conflict isn't necessarily coming out. So even if we can't have a full day offsite, a 2-day offsite, a 3-day offsite, you know, when we have the opportunity to work with teams, and if they really want to invest, it's encouraging the leadership to try to give enough space and time for conflict to emerge so that you can ensure that you are actually getting, you know, good progress in the dynamics of the team.
And I think with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you everybody for attending, and we'll get this video out as soon as we can.